Good morning and welcome to The Crawl, the show where we break down the future of search, brand authority, and everything else AI is rewriting about digital marketing. I'm Tristan Harris, your host, and today we're talking with the founder and CEO of GlassView, Jay Brooks, on how to measure success between ads and the human connection. Jay Brooks is the founder and CEO of GlassView and ventures with the emotional intelligence engine, powered by Cogware, a clinical-grade neuroscience company spun out of UPenn Medicine. Through its neuro-powered media platform, GlassView connects brands with customers in more meaningful ways by unlocking subconscious consumer response and optimizing media performance. He also serves on the IAB's Measurement and Addressability Board and is active in various community and nonprofit initiatives. Mr. Brooks earned his stripes rising through the ranks of the publishing powerhouse Condé Nast, where he built and executed the majority of U.S. digital advertising campaigns for Vogue, The New Yorker, Reddit, and Wired Online, and adding considerably to the digital advertising architecture. A husband and father, Mr. Brooks is deeply involved in the community, holds a bachelor's degree in finance from SMU and a master of business administration from Columbia Business School. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jay. How are you doing?
I'm good considering I'm operating on only a few hours of sleep. We had a blizzard last night and this weekend in Fort Worth, Texas, and a bunch of unhappy small children at home. I don't think they like the cold too much, and they're not
Yeah,
alone.
yeah. I'm in South Florida, but my son, he doesn't like the cold either, as rarely as we get it. So I totally understand, and yeah, thank you for still joining us. I, as a father of two kids, I know exactly what it's like when, it's a rough night and you wake up and you still have to power through everything. So I appreciate you still taking the time out to join us today.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
to start off, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and GlassView?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you did a terrific, thorough job with the introduction. I appreciate that. And really, I mean, to boil it down, I've been in digital media for 25 years. Um, I've always been fascinated by advertising. I've always loved my industry. And then through happenstance, I started to learn more about understanding consumer emotion and psychology, and being able to measure it now with advances in biometric and neurometric technology. And so, I began a quest 2 or 3 years ago to incorporate uh, the digital um, technology that we have today with advances in neuroscience to better understand consumer psychology and how we can optimize media placement, frequency, and creative to get opportune advertising moments for our brands and customers.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Jay. And with the growth of ads, and from the early 2000s, where targeting was abysmal to say the least, to what advertisers are able to do today, this is another leap beyond. It seems like a big evolution of what's possible.
Yeah, it certainly is. From the first ad online, I think, was for Zima beverages in the mid '90s, to banner ads of the early 2000s, to video advertising of the teens, to the increase in piping and demographic and psychographic targeting. We've gotten so good online at optimizing towards the behavior that we've sort of lost sight of the human. And so, what's exciting about incorporating neuroscience into digital advertising is that we're back to taking a step back, increasing and looking at what's increasing, connection between brand and consumer. Um, you know, the uh, the sort of glory days of advertising has to be in the '60s. The Mad Men days. You think about even David Ogilvy in earlier in the 20th century, and back then, advertising was really an industry where creatives went, where people went to better understand the art of persuasion, and and it was a lot of fun. So, digital has been incredible. The advent of online and digital targeting has done a lot for our industry, but I think it's time for us to return to our roots, and we don't have to do that by completely disregarding measurement altogether. In fact, let's incorporate new measurement that takes into account human signals. Let's make the human more central to advertising again. Once again, let's use these tools that we have today, be it biotech or neurotech, to understand, on a physiological level, how are people thinking? How do they feel about your brand? What are the opportune moments to advertise, and to better understand your brand on its sort of evolution, its diffusion curve, understanding where audiences are in terms of their perception of your brand, and how can you go from A to Z.
I love that. When I started out in my career, and I was, even before that, when I was in college, I had, the ideas of, oh, I can do some really cool creative work on the ad side. And the reality was that over the last 15 years, probably, we've become so hyper fixated on, cost per lead metrics, on, pretty much ROAS across the board, and digging into like, how can we better target based on like the most minutiae of data, right? And I do believe, I do, feel that, yeah, we've kind of lost that human portion of it. Like, we're not designing ads anymore to appeal to emotions or to, elicit a really strong emotional response. We're doing it based on, okay, what's going to move the needle on these three specific metrics, leads in, cost per lead, et cetera. So that return to the roots and that return to kind of that human connection, I think is really cool. And it kind of elicits a response in me because early on in my career, I was like, I would love to, be the next person that's making a Coke ad or something like that, like really cool ad campaigns that we see. But yeah, it's definitely, my career went a different path, but it's still something I've always loved. So when you talk about that kind of human connection in marketing, could you like dig into a little more to what that means and why it really matters alongside traditional ads?
Sure. And by the way, I don't think you're alone. People now feel it. They feel like they're being advertised at and not spoken with. And so, this idea of uh, taking a break, taking a pause, realizing we've gotten exceedingly good at optimizing towards outcome, clicks, completes, conversions, ROAS, and the like. That we're really diminishing customer lifetime value. We're eroding brand trust and loyalty. If you look now, the S&P 500 I think has an average tenure. Companies there have an average tenure of less than 15 years. Rewind 50 years ago, big brands used to be on the S&P 500 for 40, 50 years plus. Now, I realize there are macro level issues that are driving that, including you know, changing consumer preference and outsourcing and offshoring and disruptor brands and technology brands that have come into the fore. But part of that also is that there's been this erosion of brand loyalty and consumer sentiment towards big brands, and so the need is there, and the technology is there. When we first started down this road, I was speaking with folks at MIT Media Labs, at Harvard, at University of Michigan. They have a consumer psychology department there with something like 80 MRI beds, just looking at the human brain, studying why we make the decisions that we do. And by the way, neuromarketing, neuroscience is not new. Neuromarketing is not new. Coke and Pepsi were doing neuroscience, neuromarketing tests on audiences, on customers, decades ago. But what is absolutely new is through the advent of this, cutting edge neurotech, we have the scalability, the portability, so that folks can wear these portable EEG devices, technologically sophisticated enough to detect early onset Alzheimer's, and FDA pending approval for that very use case, can also see if people are feeling happy or sad or something as nuanced as nostalgic or empathetic. And because you have a big data set of folks wearing the band, you can understand in aggregate what's happening psychologically, neurologically, and use that to optimize media, placement, creative, and whatnot. So in all of my conversations, one group in particular kept coming up, and that was a group at UPenn Medicine, Department of Neuroscience and Psychology. From UPenn Medicine, there was a spin out company called Cogware, which is exactly what I just described, this neurotech, cutting edge wearable that's comfortable, sophisticated, and in terms of credibility, is the highest fidelity you could possibly be. We were able to secure a partnership with them, use their neurobands, use their audience base that they're already working with across healthcare, across athletics, across business, and from those readings, we're able to understand neurologically what's making consumers tick, use that information to better optimize media, and the results are pretty astounding.
And through that process, do you see a more positive sentiment from the end user on the ad? So the people, the audience is being advertised to. When you're tracking that emotional connection, I imagine the idea there is to find something that resonates with them. And I imagine that the audience at the end of the day is no longer feeling like they're being advertised to. Like an example, I'm redoing my office and I need to put up new blinds, search for it once. All my ads are for blinds now, right? And it's very much being marketed to. I have no emotional response to that. I'm not a blind lover. I need a set of blinds for my house. So I guess, the point there being that emotional response just doesn't exist in a lot of marketing now, in a lot of advertising. And what you're doing, being able to track that on that wearable thing, you must see that positive response. And I'm assume that after the fact, you've done feedback groups and talked to those people. What have you heard from them in relation to the various ads that you've run?
Yeah, we are looking for those moments that create this spark positivity, whether it's
Mm.
joy or empathy. And we have seen that does provide uplift in sentiment and all the way down to taking action. One of the big campaigns we did was for Texas tourism, and we were able to show that female executives showed this heightened empathetic and joyful response toward these cowboy and ranching scenes, which was very unintuitive and was an unobvious observation. But we went with it. We optimized towards female execs, and we drove 3 times as many people landing on the ground in Texas as measured by Arrivalist by understanding this audience demographic and what was motivating them to be there. Um, we also saw that there were spikes in impulse when folks saw rodeo and ranching scenes, especially younger folks, didn't go anywhere. And so there are, neuro responses that mean something, and psychological neuro responses that don't. So the beauty of this is pairing actual delivery and looking at the results in real time as we pressure test these neuro response across millions of people that we're delivering campaigns to. That's the key. Again, neuroscience is not new, neuromarketing is not new. Uh, what is new is pressure testing the neuro responses in a live environment. So you're not losing all these salient points from lab to execution. Uh, and yes, we are hearing that uh, the the um, the experience is far more positive. That at the very least, we may not be maximizing joy, but we can absolutely look where we can look to reduce fatigue, or look to reduce agitation. And so those are things you never want your brand to be associated with. A feeling uh, uh, that your audience is agitated or stressed out is probably not the best environment to be pursuing your future customers. So uh, yeah, it is looking to make that the sort of ad environment a more uh, uh, valued place, a place that creates value for consumers, not just where people are being spammed all day long.
Yeah, and that's for those in the audience who might not necessarily run ads at a large scale. Ad fatigue is a very real thing that affects the performance. So being able to help reduce that by no longer doing the ads that cause friction or agitation or don't have a positive emotional impact, that's a big thing. A lot of what we do here, we have a pretty large range of ads that we run. A lot of what we do is working to refine those and constantly coming out with new and trying to find ways to avoid ad fatigue and avoid kind of that agitation. And having a tool like this would significantly help us on that side, being able to say like, hey, let's run this, it, has a positive response, even in people that might not be, clicking through, it still is, having a positive impact. And that would certainly help cut down on the ad fatigue side. Something you said is that you brought up with the Western and the kind of unintuitive response from female executives to the ad campaign you ran. One of my favorite things in marketing is finding that unintuitive, right? And that is where you kind of break out of the mold. And it's really, I wouldn't say easy, but it's not that difficult of a skill to do more of the same. So being able to, being like, oh, this makes sense to run an ad about this to that, but being able to find that unintuitive, that's where you kind of break the mold a little bit. And I imagine the results from that campaign you mentioned, 3x as many. I imagine that was significantly, impactful at the end of the day, especially with such a small target of, female executives being able to 3x that. That's amazing. So the efficacy of that seems incredible.
It's game changing, and it really, it frankly took our business from sort of below the line activation to moving above the line into strategy. We were invited to Austin to be part of, the state's strategy when it came to tourism advertising. That didn't happen because we were optimizing towards clicks. Uh, Everyone now has access to the same signals. Everyone now has access to the same pipes. And so, with the advent of AI, agentic AI, the optimization towards a limited amount of signals is going to only plateau. There's nothing to differentiate any of the agencies out there anymore. So, we have to find a new set of signals, ideally, something that is centered on human reaction. That's what we're in this business for. And Texas tourism was one case study. Apple and Samsung, we've done work with them. We're able to show Apple customers love their brand, at least neurologically speaking, like they love a family member. Same parts of the brain light up. Kind of amazing, kind of intense. Samsung then was vying for the same information. Sorry, Samsung, we didn't see any evidence of love for your brand whatsoever. But we did see a spike in joy when negative news about Apple came out. You may want to take a look at that sort of Schadenfreude effect. They did. They came up with a campaign. It doesn't take a genius to know a good phone, and their sales were up over 100% that next year. So really understanding what made their audience tick was crucial. They were going to waste money on creative and media placement
Wow.
trying
Yeah.
to convert Apple loyalists. It was never going to happen. You had to find what made your audience tick, and then also find where they were consuming their media to be able to optimize that campaign accordingly. And the proof was in the pudding. You know, we as human beings, we all think that we're so terribly unique. We're really not. We sort of self select into these groups of ideology, of philosophy, of
It's tribalism.
identity.
Yeah.
It's tribal. It can be tribal. It can even be nuanced amongst the tribe. But these sort of neurological categories are something called a phenotype. And what we're starting to understand is that, there are these varied phenotypes that react very differently to different types of marketing messages. I almost think of it as like if you're a fan of Harry Potter, it's almost like putting on the sorting hat, and the sorting hat will tell you which house you belong into.
Yeah.
So I'm in Gryffindor. I'm a fun loving, joyful person, and I'm going to be an Apple customer. Or you put on the sorting hat, and it says you're not so much of a fun loving, optimist here. You might be a bit more of a hater, a bit more inclined to have a bit of Schadenfreude. You might be a Samsung customer, and
Yeah.
so
A
that
Samsung Slytherin to say.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You belong in Slytherin, and then I don't know. For me, I probably belong in Hufflepuff. But to me, that's terribly exciting to think that uh, that we're not all so terribly unique. We do belong somewhere, and to have a mechanism now, a technology to be able to tell me a little bit more about why I tick the way I do. That's kind of exciting. And then for brands to understand their target audience better, uh, and to get some of that loyalty that it used to exist, and perhaps some creativity that came with advertising, in decades prior. It's exciting.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I worked very early on in my career. I worked for Apple, and that I'm not surprised by that response of the same kind of areas of the brain lighting up as when you think of family members, when you think of an iPhone. I saw firsthand how people, treat that technology. And I feel like it is partially due to the marketing and how the brand was built. And partially due to the cult of personality almost that was built around Steve Jobs and then around the products themselves. And partially because they early on in their marketing, they really highlighted that connection, right? So FaceTime with family, a lot of their early ads were very focused around that. And, it doesn't surprise me that that is, how it works. Where Samsung was always, their marketing was always like, this is why we're better than iPhone, So I definitely, it's cool to see in hindsight, 15 years later, that has had a lasting impact on how people view the brand. And that is very powerful when you're building a brand of that size and you're trying to figure out how you want your audience to view you. Like, do you want to be that runner up competitor or do you want to be the one that people think of as family?
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I would say it goes back more than 15 years. I would say it goes back 42 years. Um, Apple, we now, because we realize how powerful this technology is, because there is not a campaign that we've run Origin on that we didn't have an uplift in performance. And so what we stumbled on that we thought would have a sort of um, an effect of having nice insight and maybe some learnings that our clients didn't have before. That was only the tip of the iceberg, and we realized that this became an engine that powered performance. So with that, with great power comes great responsibility. We wanted to understand more on a longitudinal premise how brands and products are diffused and how the perception changes over time. And so we downloaded 250,000 commercials that have aired in the United States over the past 50 years. And we're pairing those brands. This
Wow.
is a project in the process right now. We have not finished. We're pairing those brands in those commercials with the brand stock price on a logarithmic inflation adjusted scale to look at basically
Mhm.
a proxy of those brands and product diffusion curves. And so looking to see where commercials aired on a brand that's appeals to innovators and then early adopters and then the early majority and the late majority and the laggards, and what brands got it right, what brands failed ultimately, so that we can better understand, is there a science behind sort of building mass market share? And spoiler alert, there seems to be. So what we're finding is that early on in a brand's evolution, to get the innovators, the early adopters, you've got to spark a very strong emotion, something like loyalty or heightened empathy uh, or a tribal sort of call. Then to get from sort of early majority to late majority, you have to really evoke the brand's credibility. And you can do that by hiring a spokesperson. You can do that by reinforcing the identity. And then towards the latter part of a brand evolution or product evolution, to go from late majority to the laggard, you really have to show that you're appealing to the the brain's rational or logic decision making process. And so it's pathos, ethos, logos.
Yeah.
I mean, Aristotle coined this 2,500 years
Yeah.
ago. We are now validating at scale using neurotech in the 21st century. It is exceedingly exciting. And Apple is one of the brands that absolutely got every mark right. If you think about their early ads in 1984, make sure that 1984 is not like George Orwellian 1984. I mean, that was just emotion driving to,
Yeah.
at finest. Fast forward 15, 20 years, as Apple was taking off, as their products continued to get better, they came up with the "I'm a Mac, I'm a PC" ads that
Yeah.
reinforced credibility by identity. I want to be with the cool, the cool normal guy. I don't want to be with the pocket, protecting wearing nerd over there who purports to be a PC. And then you fast forward to Apple uh, adverts today. they're more logical. Did you know that Apple, iPhone 17 has an anti-shake mechanism that makes videotaping your friends that much easier? It's very logical, very high to how
Yeah.
to, getting this sort of laggards to come over on board with Apple. That seems to be repeated with all the best brands in the world. Everything from Liquid Death to IBM back in
Yeah.
the day, to Intel, who's a big client of ours. You really can kind of map brands on this sort of diffusion curve and how folks feel about the brand at every point, which is a really exciting pathway to be on. I would think as a marketer,
Hmm.
uh, understanding,
Absolutely.
we're at 30% market share. We want to get to 37% market share. We've got high emotion. How do we get to the credibility? What spokesperson? As Liquid Death, do we need to hire Martha Stewart? Yes, we do. Let's do it. And so uh, it's exciting to be part of that journey and also validating uh, uh, what one of the most famous philosophers knew in his and intuitively 2,500 years ago.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I think that, that process, mapping it back to Apple's journey and thinking about it more in depth. Yeah, it really did mirror that. And, now some of their ads that you see are starkly different than they were 20, 30 years ago. And that's because they're addressing a different need and they're, addressing a different portion. So that's really interesting. And I was planning on asking you, what brand do you think got it the best? What brand do you think did it the best? I have a feeling it might be Apple.
Hands down, hands
Yeah.
down. Um, but if you look at more sort of brands on the ascent right now, like Nvidia, it's a long time coming, but think about the relationship they had with their core audience early on. It was emotional. They were the video game chip provider,
Yep.
and that diehard gaming group. They knew the Nvidia chips were going to be far superior with latency, with graphics, with making their experience superior. And that same group, by the way, are the IT purchasing decision makers at Fortune 500 companies who are deciding the very chips that will be used for these multi-billion and in some cases trillion-dollar companies. You don't think that has that emotional tie has some bearing in deciding what chip company is going to provide your chip solutions? It absolutely does. And so Nvidia going from emotional to credible, and then what's their next iteration? Going to being compatible. Will it be compatible with Intel? Will it be compatible with other software systems? Will it be the logical solution used for both enterprise and state? They've got a tough road ahead of them, but I believe they can do it.
Yeah, certainly. And, that's actually interesting you bring up NVIDIA. Just here alone at NextNet, I'm sure, I'm not the only one that stretched a paycheck back in the day to buy, a 2090 or 3090. And now we're partnered with them on building the NextNet AI platform and everything that we're doing on that side. So it's definitely really interesting to think through that because that's an area that again a lot of people didn't think have impact. That emotional connection with people that or that hardcore gaming crowd. Well, yeah, most of I think you'd be hard pressed to find people in the IT realm that weren't part of that crowd or aren't still part of that crowd. So that's really interesting, and it kind of brings up the idea, kind of brings us around to another topic of, AI, right? And how AI is kind of rewriting the digital marketing realm um, across the board, from ads to targeting to everything to content to everything we do. I'm sure you've done research on this. I don't know that you necessarily need to do deep research on this, but we've seen AI become increasingly used on the ad front. So on the creative specifically, and I don't think you have to go further than the comments on Reddit or on Facebook, meta ads, things along those lines, to find that there's been a very mixed response from audiences when the creatives are used from or AI generated. Can you kind of tell me the impact that kind of this AI, the advent of AI has had on emotional responses to ads?
Yeah, sure. We're seeing the biggest adverse response when a brand already has a strong connection with their audience, and then they break that trust by delivering an AI ad that has nothing to do with the sort of core sentiment that people already feel about the brand. So I just wrote an article about that in Real 360, where I was featured in Real 360 commenting on this regarding McDonald's and what they did with their AI ad that was pulled quickly because there was such an adverse reaction. And what, you know, I guess the long and short of it is that if you're a big brand, you have a big audience and a lot to lose, tread lightly with AI, especially if you're creating a new creative and trying to pass as being real. Uh, Probably up and comers have a lot more liberty to go to market with AI generated because there's no expectation of authenticity. Um, and in fact, if you are an AI run company, there's a good chance that running an AI ad is authentic to your brand. Not the case with McDonald's. And so the reaction from McDonald's audience was swift and harsh. They pulled the ad, and I bet they won't make that mistake again. Now, is there opportunity for iterative AI advancement to creative? Certainly, but I think they probably would be well advised to test it, maybe using some neurotech before they deploy it. Um,
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really valid point is when you have a brand that's known for that human connection, it's a jarring change for your audience to suddenly, change over from that, focus human connection to here's, something that's clearly generated with AI, built on AI, even if it's very finely polished and a team worked on editing it and changing it and making sure that it was there, we've seen that, like you said, we've seen that, uh, negative response from McDonald's and, they pulled that ad. Um, but the interesting part that I think it is the ability for newer brands to build out on that side. So, AI allows us to uh, leverage some significant growth when it comes to what your team's able to do. So, it significantly expands bandwidth. So, for smaller brands or brands that are just starting out that don't necessarily have that human connection, especially if you're in the AI space, that's something that could be very, very useful to, take that, make that part of the identity. And with AI, you can do a lot of things that, it's pretty hard to do on a budget. And it's pretty hard to do with people in general, right? So, being able to leverage that, I think it brings up an interesting conundrum or question there of like if you are utilizing AI heavily in your ad creatives and everything else, is there a way to maintain that human connection? And if so, how do you walk that fine line, basically?
yeah, I think it depends on sort of the size of your brand, of your company already, the existing audience you have, and how you go about it. So, maybe for the biggest brands out there, their work is going to have to be more iterative, and it's going to have to be, uh, you know, um, done with a lot more disclaimers so that their audience knows what's happening. Maybe for up and coming brands, undoubtedly, there's going to be so many opportunities with AI to allow for generative, creative creation and different copy being used. Permutations of 1,000 or 1,000,000 on one campaign to identify what's resonating with target audiences and then hone in on that. Uh, in fact, there may be more opportunity to connect with customers using AI, which is kind of cool. And there might be more cases of companies like Apple who become these larger than life, part of our everyday life uh, uh, brands that we identify and really resonate with us because there are so many more opportunities to connect. You know, Instead of just relying on human intuition, uh, what about intuition amplified? And then what about this idea of pressure testing it with technology that allows us to
Yeah.
assess real time sentiment, and then identifying those opportunities for connection in real time, so that we get more salient readings than just clicks and completes. So I'm very bullish on AI. I'm very bullish on the future of advertising, utilizing, harnessing AI, and I think it's only going to make us get stronger as an industry. Uh, and those who adopt it, those who don't resist the sort of inevitable, I think are going to become, that much better at their jobs. David Ogilvy, uh, for as brilliant as he was, he had some pretty phenomenal flops as well. One famous one was for Puerto Rican tourism. He did such a great job, showing the beauty of Puerto Rico and the ease of getting there. And it
Mhm.
was a very logical, rational sell that he missed the mark on being able to connect with audiences. And while he thought that TV was kind of gimmicky and he didn't want to sort of enter that fluff world of trying to make people feel. He
Mhm.
himself admitted that he failed in some of his ideas to make people actually fail. So imagine David Ogilvy powered with with AI and neurotech. I think that would just allow him even more creative genius.
Yeah, and it's about reach, right? So it's about being able to say, a lot of us operate in an area where we don't have data points or we don't have uh, the necessary data to make every decision 100% perfect, right? Um, I don't think that's ever going to be possible, but the more that you're able to tell, especially in advertising, the more you're able to drill down on and understand your audience, the better chance you have for success. So, in that example, Ogilvy with the tourism, it's if he was able to have an understanding of the emotional response that people are having to those ads, yeah, definitely, 100%, that would have somebody as intelligent as he was and as, tuned into the industry as he was, he would have been able to understand those signals and say, okay, yeah, this is not having the impact and the response that we had hoped for. How can we change that? And I think that that's a very valid point. And, something that talking about pairing AI and marketing in general for this podcast, which is a lot of what we talk about. I know at GlassView, you guys have invented next generation AI power tools that kind of that incorporate everything we've talked about and help brands to connect with their audiences. So it's pretty clear that everybody we talk to across all of our podcasts, they all come to the same conclusion, and that AI is incredibly valuable and it allows us to do much more than we were ever able to do before, and it's changing the game. And here's how that person specific use case is. And I think so far for everybody we've talked to, there's been a lot of incredibly interesting guests on this podcast. I think that this specific technology is one of the ones that excites me the most, simply because I'm an SVP of marketing, right? How do we reach our audience in a better, more authentic way, and how do we build on that human connection? Is that's I spend a lot of time late at night not falling asleep thinking about that. So that's this is a really awesome kind of tool and platform for brands. When we drill back down into how brands are actually using AI, when it comes to measuring, engaging ad performance, human connection, and things like that, is there a way to utilize AI to help kind of evaluate success in that realm?
Yeah, and first of all, I want to say thank you so much for saying that, and I share your enthusiasm. I've always loved the advertising industry, but I wake up every day so excited to be part of this venture, and uh, and I really do feel like the creative engine is just getting started, and I really do feel like we have this opportunity to take it back to when uh, advertising was in its heyday. Um, so I share that, and we're going to be, you know, uh, endeavoring to fulfill, um, making this industry fun and creative again, but maybe with a 21st century twist.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think everybody in our generation that watched Mad Men, and that was in advertising and marketing was like, maybe we could go back to some of the fun stuff we used to do and not stare at spreadsheets all day.
I know exactly, exactly. Yeah, so I do believe AI can help us get there. You know, it will help us come up with creative concepts. It will help us, iterate and iterate at an increasing level so that we can try nuance and try to see what's connecting with audiences in real time. And then once you see something that connects, it'll spark, 1,000 other ideas that we can then, go down those paths as well. Uh, and because of AI, we don't the sort of test and learn time becomes, hyper consolidated, concentrated. And so we have the ability, if you're creative and you're an idea a minute kind of person, AI should be your best friend because it allows you to pressure
Oh
test
yeah.
that idea a minute now like never before. Whereas before, you may have to sit and wait and think on that to decide which idea you're going to bring your boss or the client uh, out of the 50 you had that week to see which one they're going to try. Let's try them all now. So that should be, I think, exciting for folks. And and I think it's all about the use of our imagination to identify which signals to put into the mix. So there's this big idea, big conversation right now about the modern, media mix and and how folks are going to look at, the marketing media mix and how folks are going to weight different signals in their mix to both take advantage of and get maximum return on investment for their existing audience, but also to find those frontier audiences with the test and learn. So I think, incorporating new signals like neurotech, like biotech, like there's a department at Stanford who are doing a lot of test and learn on um, even the biodome as measured by sensors in people's bathrooms, which is kind of amazing. Are you healthy? Do you have a healthy gut? And are you deficient in vitamins? Let's let you know that. So there's a proliferation in the Internet of Things, in nanotechnology and biotech and neurotech that allows us to really layer on any kind of signals we want. And so let's get out of this sort of closed box loop of optimizing towards clicks, completes, conversions, and ROAS, which might do a good job at selling something today, but at what cost? I think there should be a study done on this. If you're maximizing your ROAS today, what cost are you leaving on the table in terms of customer lifetime value, in terms of brand sentiment? And I think that the answer is probably shocking to folks thinking long term and to marketing leaders. Let's introduce new signals. Let's use all of those signals in AI, and let's make marketing fun again.
Yeah, and I that would be a great line to end this podcast on, just to say. But I think one area that's probably super impactful is consumer packaged goods, right? Where you're advertising to a very large audience. Um, Whereas, some of the more boring areas of, business or B2B marketing, I wonder what the big difficulties there are. And that would be interesting to
Same
dig into.
same same thing. I'll jump in on B2Bs.
Yeah.
B2B are some of our biggest clients. I think I can talk about this one. Yeah, I yes, because it was in the press and we put it up for an award. So Intel was trying to reach IT purchasing decision makers in countries in Europe, in the UK, and Italy, and France. We were able to outfit folks in those countries with Cogware. We were able to serve ads, and we found that the ads that resonated when at least 1 out of 7 people spiked joy, those were the ads that were most effective in having that audience download white papers and then ultimately procure Intel as a solution into their corporation.
Mhm.
1 in 7. We didn't know what that meant. Then, when we found out that the average size team of IT purchasing decision makers at these medium and small enterprises that Intel was targeting was 7 people, it clicked.
Yeah.
The most
Wow.
important thing for an enterprise sale is that you have one strong advocate.
Mhm.
And when we were able to drive joy in 1 out of 7 people, and that person became an advocate then to push Intel as a solution into their teams, that's when we hit gold. B2B folks, IT purchasing decision makers are people too, and they do make decision with emotion. Also rationalization and
Mhm.
logic as well. But making people feel is universal. It's not just something that's on this B2C, CPG. It goes in B2B. It goes across the board.
That's fantastic, and that's a incredibly valid point. That's something that a lot of times, when you're looking between B2C and B2B marketing, there's a lot of, you know, there's a different way that you approach each audience, obviously, especially depending on what you're selling. Um, from an agency standpoint, we've worked with hundreds of clients across B2C and B2B, and there's always, that very that thought of B2B as a harder target, it's a smaller target. They tend to be more guarded with their budget because it's not, oh, I've got $20 to spend. It's, you're potentially asking somebody to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on what the solution is. So that's a very valid point though. We definitely see that on our side where, if we're targeting a specific company that we'd like to work with, and we're, trying to reach out to a few different people, that internal advocate, once you have that one person that's able to advocate for your brand and say like, hey guys, even if we don't go for with them, we should check them out. That is the biggest barrier to entry when you're going after like, that kind of direct outreach and sales motion. So I think that, a lot of what I've seen traditionally in marketing definitely, you know, matches exactly what you just said. Once you have that 1 in 7, so to speak, you definitely you have a much higher chance for success.
It's not guaranteeing a yes,
No,
but in a sea of no, it's good to have at least one person with some passion trying
of
to
course.
implement a solution.
Yeah, and I think too on the sales side, which is so intrinsically married to marketing. On the sales side, we see a lot of that kind of sea of no, and having any kind of lighthouse out there is a very good thing to do. So we're running short on time. I did want to ask, we a lot of our audience, a lot of people we work with are small and medium businesses. Um, and a lot of them are people that don't necessarily have an ad specialist on their team that has been focused on what's changing in the market, what's changing in technology and things along those lines. So something I would love to hear from you is one thing that brands should be doing with their ads and one thing that they should absolutely not be doing.
Wow. I mean, I guess it
Loaded
depends.
question because it's hard with such a generic response, but
Um, I think what they should be doing is not playing it safe. I think keeping with brand authenticity, keeping with the social contract you have with your existing audience, people really, I think, are resonating with brands that are taking risks right now, that are listening online to what's happening in social media. Look at the Dr. Pepper jingle. It's
yep,
brilliant. Brilliant.
that's a fantastic example.
Go for it, engage your audience, and don't play it safe. People I think people are done with the sort of vanilla uh corporate speak.
Yeah.
What should they not be doing? Just that.
I think that's a fantastic response. And, if you think back about all the ads that people even not in the industry still talk about, like you remember that ad back then, they were always disruptive. They weren't the mold. So one that stands out to me that people still bring up is like, was that a fever dream or was that something, the Quiznos ad from the 2000s, the one with the, I don't even know what to call it, the weird things on it. That's one that people still talk about. And this is, 2026 now, right? That's, I think it was 26 years ago that ad came out. And then, tying it back to more recent events, the Dr. Pepper jingle. That is a fantastic use case of pay attention to what people are talking about, work it into your brand, take the risk, right? Because Dr. Pepper, that was a risk for them, right? They had to, contact that person, figure it out, and spin it up very quickly because the window for that is not exactly very large time wise. So I think that's an absolutely fantastic call out. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you as well for joining us, Jay. I really enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoyed speaking with you. I'm very excited about what you guys are doing over at GlassView. I think that there's um there's a big lack of that human connection in marketing and advertising over the last 20, 30 years, and the people that have got it right, we've seen the ads, we've seen them get it right, but having another way to help people measure that and grow is really awesome. So thank you so much for joining us, and before we close out, I always like to give our guests the opportunity to tell our audience where people can find you.
Well, first of all, Tristan, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. And and you're keeping me on my toes after having 3 hours of sleep last night with this blizzard in town and two screaming infants at home. Uh, you can find me at glassview.com. My email address is is on there, and would love to stay in touch with you and your audience. And certainly, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, hopefully you guys stay warm out there. I would commiserate, but being in South Florida, it's actually 81 degrees here for some in January for some awful reason. I just want it to
I
be
can't even hear that right now.
cold. Well, I just want it to be cold. I'm a cold weather guy. I wouldn't mind some snow once in a while. It's just unrelenting
If
heat
I
and
had
humidity.
cogwear on, jealousy would be spiking right now.
Well, maybe for both of us because it's too hot out here. So everybody that's listening, if you like this episode, make sure to follow, leave a review, and as always, comment on topics you would like us to cover in the future. We put out a new podcast quite frequently, so topics, guests, all of that is very important to us to help us continue uh, having guests that are important to the audience and help address their needs and to help us continue to grow. So thank you very much again, Jay. It was fantastic talking to you. Thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Tristan. Take care.